Welcome back to the deep dive. This time, we're diving into the life and work of Peter Thiel,
Oh, yeah, Peter Thiel.
a figure who, well, he really embodies this whole grifter or gifted question we always talk about.
Yeah, he's really one of a kind.
So we'll be examining his actions, his investments, his
It's
pronouncement.
like we're detectives gathering clues.
Exactly. To figure out if he's genuinely changing the world or just lining his pockets.
Right, right.
What do you think is like the most interesting piece of this puzzle we're about to dive into?
Well, for me, it's the sheer range of his endeavors.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Thiel went from co-founding PayPal to being like this early investor in Facebook,
Right.
which made him millions.
Yeah, the classic gifted narrative.
Exactly, but then he funds a lawsuit that takes down Gawker Media.
What?
Bankrolls politicians with completely opposite views like it's nothing,
Oh, yeah.
and then dabbles in things like seasteading.
Seriously?
It's wild. It's almost like he enjoys courting controversy.
It really does seem that way. So that's what makes this deep dive so intriguing.
I know, right?
It's not just about understanding Peter Thiel. It's about understanding the blurred lines between ambition, innovation,
Oh, absolutely.
and maybe even a touch of ruthlessness in a world where technology and power are so intertwined.
It's a recipe for, well, for someone like Peter Thiel.
Exactly. So let's start with his early success in Silicon Valley.
Okay, so the PayPal Mafia, as they're sometimes called,
Ah, yes.
they really changed the landscape of online payments.
Yeah, for sure.
And Thiel's early investment in Facebook, I mean, back when it was just a college networking site,
Oh, yeah.
that was a genius move.
It really was.
It suggests a real knack for spotting opportunities that others miss.
Yeah, it does.
You know.
But then we have this whole decision to secretly fund Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against Gawker Media,
Oh, yeah.
which led to the site's bankruptcy.
Mhm.
That seemed personal.
Oh, definitely.
Like it was fueled by a grudge against Gawker for outing him as gay years earlier.
Right.
So, does this point to a darker side? Like a willingness to use his wealth for revenge?
Well, it certainly raises questions about his motives.
Yeah?
Was he defending privacy or was he trying to silence a critic? This is where the whole grifter suspicion starts to emerge.
Okay, I see.
And his political activity just makes things even more complicated.
Oh, yeah, because he's backed candidates with radically different, even conflicting ideologies.
Yeah.
Like Ron Paul, a libertarian, and then a hard pivot to Trump in 2016.
It's a head scratcher.
It's like he's playing both sides of the chessboard,
Yeah.
hedging his bets, maybe even enjoying the chaos he creates.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And now there are these reports suggesting he's moving away from direct political contributions in this 2024 cycle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and perhaps focusing on supporting candidates who've worked for him in the past.
Interesting.
So is this a strategic retreat
I don't know.
or a calculated move to exert influence in a more subtle way? To solve this puzzle, I think we need to understand the man himself. Okay, so back up a bit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What was his childhood like? What were his early influences? Was there anything in his background that might explain his, let's call it, unconventional path?
Well, his background is far from ordinary.
Okay.
I mean, born in Germany, Thiel's family moved a lot during his childhood.
Oh, wow.
He was also a chess prodigy.
Really?
Yeah, excelling at a game that requires, strategic thinking,
Right.
anticipating your opponent's moves, all that.
Almost like a real-life game of Queen's Gambit.
Uh-huh, yeah, something like that.
Could those early chess skills have translated to his later dealings in business and politics? Always thinking several steps ahead, planning his next move.
It's a fascinating parallel.
It is.
And his academic path, well, it reflects this intellectual curiosity he has.
Oh, yeah.
He studied both philosophy and law at Stanford. Wow. And even back then, he displayed this contrarian streak,
Yeah.
co-founding a conservative publication called the Stanford Review. So even then, he was questioning the status quo, going against the grain.
Absolutely.
This definitely seems to be a pattern.
100%.
So this fascination with outsider thinking,
Yeah.
is it deeply tied to his intellectual influences?
Oh, it is.
Okay, so who are some of those influences?
Well, he's drawn to figures like René Girard,
Okay.
who was a philosopher who believed that human conflict stems from mimetic desire.
What's that?
It's like wanting what others want,
Oh, okay.
leading to envy, rivalry, even violence.
So does this mean Thiel sees the world as like a zero-sum game?
That's a recurring theme in his thinking, yes.
Okay.
He's expressed skepticism about the concept of progress,
Really?
arguing that we're not necessarily advancing as a society, but
Wow.
rather just shifting power dynamics.
That's a pretty bleak view.
It is.
So this actually makes his investment in Palantir, the data mining company, even more interesting.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, Palantir has raised serious ethical concerns about privacy and surveillance. So, is he genuinely concerned about national security or simply profiting from like a climate of fear and distrust?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. And it brings us right back to that grifter or gifted dilemma.
Oh, for sure.
Is he driven by idealism, opportunism,
I don't know.
or a complex blend of both?
Yeah, it's tough to say.
It's like a Rubik's Cube.
Huh?
With every twist and turn,
Yeah.
you think you're seeing a pattern, then it all shifts again.
Right?
Like his support for seasteading,
Oh, yeah. Seasteading.
the idea of building self-governing communities on floating platforms in the middle of the ocean.
Sounds crazy.
It does. So is this like a visionary solution to escape government overreach?
Mm-hmm.
Or simply a billionaire's escape fantasy?
Who knows?
And then there's the Thiel Fellowship, offering young people $100,000 to drop out of college and pursue their entrepreneurial dreams.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Is he genuinely trying to disrupt the traditional education system?
Mm-mm.
Or devaluing education while creating a workforce that's more aligned with his libertarian views?
It's hard to say for sure.
It's almost like he's saying, do as I say, not as I did.
Yeah, given his own background.
Exactly. These are all pieces of the puzzle we need to consider as we dig deeper.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to unpack here.
So what stands out to you so far?
Well,
What clues have we uncovered that might help us answer this whole grifter or gifted question?
well, the contradictions are definitely fascinating.
I know, right?
He makes billions from Facebook
Uh-huh.
and then criticizes Silicon Valley for stifling innovation.
Yeah. He funds ventures that could really benefit humanity,
Mm-hmm.
but also ones that raise serious ethical concerns.
Like Palantir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's intentionally blurring the lines between idealism and opportunism.
Yeah, you've hit on a key point.
Have I?
It's not just about Peter Thiel himself.
Oh.
It's about what his actions tell us about the world we live in.
Well,
A world where technology is reshaping everything. Fortunes can be made and lost overnight. And the line between disruption and exploitation can be incredibly blurry.
that's a really good point.
Thanks.
So as we continue this deep dive, I think we need to keep asking, what are the values driving his decisions? What are the potential consequences of his actions?
Yeah, good questions.
And ultimately, how do WE, as individuals, navigate a world where charisma and controversy are so closely intertwined?
Right. How do we tell the visionaries from the con artists?
Exactly. Now let's delve into some specific examples of his actions that have fueled both his success and all the controversies surrounding him.
Okay, so where do we start?
Let's start with his rather provocative views on the European tech scene.
Oh, yes, I remember reading about those.
He claimed there were no successful tech companies in Europe.
Can you imagine?
The uproar.
Oh, the uproar.
But to be fair,
Yeah.
he did acknowledge there were some good reasons for that,
Like what?
like the lack of privacy concerns in the U.S.
Yeah.
compared to Europe,
Like-
and how U.S. tech companies might be unjustly punished in Europe.
Yeah, I see that.
But he also pointed to the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR,
Uh-huh.
suggesting it stifles innovation.
Really?
Yeah, he basically said that European startups were too focused on privacy
Oh, wow.
and not enough on growth and disruption. And that statement, unsurprisingly, sparked a lot of debate,
Oh, I bet.
with many European entrepreneurs firing back.
Of course.
They cited companies like Spotify, which is headquartered in Sweden
Yeah.
and has a market cap of over $20 billion.
A pretty successful company.
You know, talk about hitting a nerve.
Yeah, he really poked the bear there.
But it is interesting to note that some European entrepreneurs actually agreed with Thiel.
They did.
They felt that certain European regulations were a bit too restrictive
Oh.
and might be holding back innovation.
Interesting.
It just goes to show how cultural and political differences play a role in perceptions of success and innovation.
For sure.
But this is also a great example of how Thiel's statements, even when they're controversial,
Yeah.
they can ignite important conversations.
They do get people talking.
It's not about whether he's right or wrong,
True.
but rather the questions he raises about the global tech landscape
Right.
and the values that shape it.
Okay. I'm with you.
Now, we can't talk about Peter Thiel without addressing the Gawker Media saga.
Oh, yeah. That was a wild one.
This is where the grifter or gifted question becomes even more complex.
No, so.
Well, Thiel's involvement in Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against Gawker,
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about legal strategy.
Oh,
It seemed deeply personal.
It did.
Back in 2007, Gawker's Valleywag blog outed Thiel as gay
Yeah.
in a rather insensitive article.
I remember that.
And Thiel, who hadn't publicly discussed his sexuality at that point, felt violated.
It was a big deal.
He clearly saw it as a betrayal and like a deep personal wrong.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And then years later, it came out that Thiel had secretly funded several lawsuits against Gawker, including Hogan's, which involved a leaked sex tape.
Oh.
And this ultimately led to Gawker's bankruptcy and closure.
It did.
It's like he waited for the right moment to strike back,
Mm-hmm.
using his considerable wealth to take down a media outlet he perceived as an enemy.
Yeah.
Talk about playing the long game.
Wow.
So this ignited a huge debate.
I bet.
Some praised Thiel for defending privacy and holding a media outlet accountable for its unethical practices.
Right.
Others criticized him for using his wealth to silence a critical voice, a move that many saw as an attack on freedom of the press.
Yeah.
It really brought that grifter or gifted question to the forefront.
It did.
Was he a defender of privacy?
Yeah.
Or a vengeful billionaire silencing dissent? And more importantly, what does this tell us about the power dynamics in a world where wealth can be used to shape narratives
Right.
and influence public opinion?
That's a good question.
It really is.
So he won, right?
Yeah, he definitely won in that instance. But the ethical questions linger. They do. So we have this backdrop of controversy, and let's be honest, a bit of ruthlessness.
Right.
How do we reconcile that with his image as like a tech visionary?
Well, to understand that,
Yeah.
we need to examine his venture capital endeavors.
Okay.
His firm, Founders Fund,
Yeah.
has an incredibly diverse portfolio of companies, many of which have revolutionized their respective industries.
Companies like Airbnb, SpaceX, Spotify,
Oh, yeah.
they've all disrupted the status quo,
Totally.
changed the way we live, work, and play.
For sure.
So are these the actions of someone who's just out to make a quick buck?
I don't know.
Or is there something more to it?
Good question.
He's also invested in companies like Affirm, a buy now, pay later service, and Endural Industries, which focuses on defense technology.
Right.
It's a mix of forward-thinking ventures and ones that operate in, well, ethically complex spaces.
For sure.
It seems like he's drawn to those gray areas.
Yeah.
Those spaces where the ethical questions loom large.
It's a pattern.
Which again raises the question.
Okay.
Is he driven by a genuine belief in the potential of these companies?
Yeah.
Or is it purely about the pursuit of profit? Does he have a grand vision for the future? Or is he simply a master opportunist capitalizing on emerging trends?
I mean, it's hard to say.
It is.
Yeah.
To answer those questions, I think we need to take a closer look at some of these specific companies,
Okay.
starting with Palantir,
All right. Palantir.
which has become synonymous with big data and its potential for both good and bad.
Yeah, Palantir's story is fascinating because its roots are deeply intertwined with the intelligence community.
Really?
Its first backer was Intel, the venture capital arm of the CIA.
Oh, wow. So from the beginning, Palantir was developing software used for surveillance and data analysis,
Exact.
tools that have been used in the fight against terrorism and crime.
Right.
That's pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
So Palantir's software has this ability to sift through massive amounts of data.
Huge amounts.
Photos, videos, financial records, social media posts.
It's crazy.
It can identify patterns and connections that would be impossible for humans to see,
Yeah, it's super powerful.
making it an incredibly powerful tool for intelligence agencies and law enforcement.
Oh, sure.
But this also raises significant concerns about privacy.
Oh, absolutely.
What happens when such powerful tools fall into the wrong hands?
Yeah, it's a scary thought.
Could it lead to a surveillance state where citizens are constantly monitored?
That's the fear.
And that's the ethical tightrope that Thiel is walking with Palantir.
Right.
On the one hand, he's invested in a company that's providing tools that could be used to combat terrorism.
Yeah.
On the other hand, he's profiting from a technology that has the potential to erode civil liberties.
It's a tough one.
It's a classic dual-use dilemma.
It is.
A technology that can be used for good or evil.
Mm-hmm.
And it all comes down to who controls it and how they choose to use it.
That's the key.
So does this raise any red flags for you?
Well, it certainly raises important questions. It's worth noting that Palantir has faced public scrutiny and legal challenges over its data mining practices.
Oh, really?
It's been accused of violating immigration laws and discriminating against job applicants.
So even within his own portfolio,
Yeah,
Thiel is no stranger to controversy.
definitely not.
He's backing companies that are pushing the boundaries of what's technologically possible. But those advancements often come with a hefty price tag in terms of ethical considerations.
That's true.
And that's a recurring pattern throughout Thiel's career.
I see that.
He's not afraid to court controversy.
Nope.
Whether it's through his investments, his political activity, or his public statements.
Right.
Speaking of which, his decision to back Facebook,
Oh, yeah, Facebook.
while undeniably lucrative, has also been viewed through the lens of his complex relationship with big tech.
Interesting.
How can he be both a beneficiary of Silicon Valley's success and a vocal critic of its culture?
Yeah, it's a paradox for sure.
It is. He was an early believer in Facebook's potential,
Right.
becoming the first outside investor back in 2004.
Wow.
He clearly saw the power of social media to connect people and disrupt traditional communication.
Yeah, he was ahead of the curve on that one.
And that investment paid off big time when Facebook went public.
Oh, yeah.
He made billions
Billions.
and solidified his status as a tech visionary.
He did.
But then he turns around and starts criticizing Facebook and the entire tech industry.
What?
It's almost like he's biting the hand that fed him.
That's wild.
So in recent years, he's argued that Silicon Valley has become too focused on incremental improvements
Okay.
rather than groundbreaking innovations.
So not enough moonshots.
Exactly. He even suggests that the tech industry has been brainwashed by higher education,
Interesting.
resulting in a culture of conformity and a lack of original thinking.
But hold on.
Yeah,
Isn't he a Stanford law graduate himself?
exactly. The irony is not lost on anyone,
No, it's not.
but it speaks to his contrarian nature,
It does.
his willingness to challenge conventional wisdom,
Right.
even when it contradicts his own experiences.
Yeah, that's Peter Thiel for you.
So after making billions from Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
he criticizes the very company that made him rich.
Wow.
Is this genuine concern?
I don't know.
Or is he just positioning himself as like the anti-Silicon Valley guy?
That's a good question.
Well, it's interesting to note that Thiel stepped down from Facebook's board in 2022.
He did.
And around the same time, he publicly announced he was moving away from Silicon Valley.
Really? Where did he go?
He reportedly relocated to Los Angeles and is investing in a more diverse range of ventures,
Like what?
including biotech and artificial intelligence.
Interesting.
So is this a genuine shift in thinking
Mm-hmm.
or a strategic move to distance himself from a tech industry that's facing increasing scrutiny? What do you make of this move?
It's difficult to say for sure.
Right.
But it's definitely a development worth watching.
It is.
It's like he's always one step ahead,
Yeah.
playing a different game than everyone else.
But what are the rules of that game?
Right.
And who ultimately benefits?
Good questions.
These are the questions we'll continue to explore
We will.
as we dive deeper into the world of Peter Thiel.
The enigmatic Peter Thiel. Yeah, it's like he thrives on being unpredictable, on constantly challenging expectations.
That's a great way to put it. It's as if he enjoys just shaking things up,
Oh, yeah.
whether it's through his investments, his political activity,
Right.
or even his personal choices.
Oh, yeah.
Which brings us to a venture that really exemplifies this disruptor mentality.
Seasteading.
Seasteading. Yeah, the idea of creating like self-governing communities on floating platforms.
Right.
In the middle of the ocean, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel.
It does. What do you think drew Thiel to this? Was it the technological challenge? The potential for societal experimentation? Or maybe just this desire to escape the perceived constraints of traditional governments?
Well, Thiel has often expressed this libertarian worldview,
Right.
advocating for less government regulation and more individual freedom.
So seasteading, for him, could be seen as a way to create a blank slate,
Okay.
a place to experiment with new forms of governance and social organization.
So a sort of libertarian utopia, free from the burdens of bureaucracy and traditional laws.
That's the ideal, at least.
Okay.
But critics argue that seasteading is just a form of escapism,
Oh, really?
a way for the wealthy to isolate themselves from the problems of the world
I see.
rather than trying to solve them.
And let's be realistic, the logistical challenges are immense.
Huge, yeah.
Building sustainable infrastructure, ensuring safety and security on these floating platforms,
Yeah.
dealing with environmental concerns,
Right.
navigating potential conflicts with existing maritime laws.
It's a lot.
It's a monumental undertaking, to say the least.
Yes.
And while Thiel has invested millions in the Seasteading Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to, advancing this concept,
Right.
it seems like his enthusiasm has waned in recent years.
Oh, has it?
Yeah, he's even acknowledged that the project may not be feasible anytime soon.
So maybe the pragmatist in him realized that even with all his wealth and influence, some challenges are just too great to overcome, at least for now.
Yeah, or maybe he's simply shifted his focus to other projects
Mhm.
he considers more promising in the short term.
That's possible.
Remember, Thiel is a master of the long game,
He is.
but he's also incredibly adaptable and willing to pivot when necessary.
That's true.
And this willingness to adapt and shift gears is definitely evident in another one of his controversial ventures, the Thiel Fellowship.
Oh, yeah, the Thiel Fellowship, the program that offers those $100,000 grants to young people
Right.
under 20 to drop out of college and pursue their entrepreneurial dreams.
It certainly ruffled some feathers in academia.
Oh, I bet it did.
So what do you think was the driving force behind this? Is he genuinely concerned about what he sees as the shortcomings of higher education? Or is there like a more self-serving motive at play?
Well, Thiel has often argued that college is a waste of time and money for many, especially those who are naturally entrepreneurial
Right.
and driven to create.
Yeah.
He believes that the traditional education system stifles creativity
Hmm.
and that bright young minds are better off learning by doing,
Okay.
launching their own ventures.
So he's essentially saying, forget the textbooks. Go out there and build the next Facebook.
In a sense, yes,
And while the fellowship has produced some notable success stories,
it has.
with recipients founding companies in areas like biotech, software, energy,
Yes, some impressive stuff.
it's also drawn considerable criticism.
Oh, of course.
With the biggest criticism being that encouraging young people to forego a college education is irresponsible.
Yeah, especially those who might not have the resources or support systems to thrive as entrepreneurs.
Right, it's a very risky proposition.
It is.
And it's certainly not a path that's suitable for everyone.
Definitely not.
Plus, let's not forget that Thiel himself is a product of elite universities.
Like Stanford,
Exactly.
the iron
Yeah,
go.
that makes it all the more intriguing. Is he being hypocritical? Or does he genuinely believe he's offering an alternative path to success for those who don't fit the traditional mold?
It's a valid question.
It is.
And it ties into this larger debate about the role of education in society.
Right.
Whether the traditional college model is still relevant in today's rapidly changing world.
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is.
It's also interesting to consider the Thiel Fellowship in the context of his other ventures, like seasteading.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, both seem to be about creating alternative systems,
Uh-huh.
whether it's escaping the constraints of government or the traditional education system.
Right. You're right.
There's this recurring theme here of challenging established institutions,
Yeah.
seeking out individuals who are willing to think differently,
Mm-hmm.
to operate outside the norm.
Yeah. That definitely seems to be a key part of what drives Thiel.
Okay, so we've explored these ventures that are often seen as radical, even outlandish.
Right.
But let's bring it back down to earth a little bit and talk about Thiel's political involvement, which has been equally controversial, to say the least.
Oh, yeah. His political views have been described as like this mix of libertarianism and authoritarianism,
Really?
a combination that often leaves people scratching their heads.
Yeah, it's like he wants less government control over the economy, but more control over society.
Right.
How do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory viewpoints?
It's a puzzle for sure.
It is. He's a self-described conservative libertarian,
Okay.
which already hints at those inherent tensions within his ideology.
Yeah.
And his support for candidates across the political spectrum has only added to the confusion.
I can imagine.
He's backed candidates from both ends of the spectrum,
Like who?
from Ron Paul, a staunch libertarian, to Donald Trump, a populist who defied traditional political labels.
Wow, that's quite a range.
What do you make of these seemingly disparate choices?
Well, it seems like Thiel is drawn to those he sees as disruptors.
Okay.
Individuals who can shake up the established order, challenge the status quo,
Right.
create new paradigms.
So it's not necessarily about ideology,
Right.
but rather about this shared desire to disrupt, to overturn existing power structures.
That seems to be a key factor.
Okay.
Remember, Thiel believes in the power of great founders.
Right, those who can reshape industries and create new realities.
Exactly.
And he may have seen Trump as like a potential great founder of a new political era.
Interesting.
But of course, that vision didn't quite pan out the way he might have hoped.
No, it didn't.
But even though Thiel has expressed disappointment with the outcome of the Trump presidency,
Yeah.
he hasn't disavowed his support.
It seems like he's willing to overlook a lot in pursuit of his vision.
He does.
So where does he stand politically now?
Yeah, it seems like he's pulled back from direct political contributions.
He has.
But I doubt he's completely checked out of the game.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Sources suggest he's unlikely to make direct political contributions in the 2024 election cycle.
Oh, really?
However, there's speculation that he might continue to support candidates who have worked for him,
Okay.
providing them with guidance and connections,
Right.
rather than like direct financial contributions.
So operating more behind the scenes,
Exactly.
using his network and influence to shape political discourse in a more subtle way.
That's what it seems like.
And we need to remember that even though he's stepping back from direct political involvement, his ideas and investments continue to have a significant impact on the tech landscape.
Right.
And his political views have influenced a new generation of conservative thinkers.
So while he may not be making headlines with his political endorsements,
Right.
his influence is still felt, perhaps even more so in these less visible ways.
Interesting.
It's like he's playing a long game,
It is.
strategically positioning himself to exert influence over the long term.
And that brings us back to the central question of this deep dive. Is Peter Thiel a visionary genius or a masterful manipulator?
Yeah.
Is he a force for good, a force for disruption, or perhaps a bit of both?
It's clear that he's a complex figure who defies easy categorization.
He does.
He embraces contradictions, pushes boundaries, and seems to relish controversy.
He does. He really does.
So as we move into the final part of this deep dive,
Okay.
I think it's helpful to examine the philosophical underpinnings of his worldview.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Perhaps by understanding his core beliefs,
Right.
we can gain a clearer insight into his motivations and the potential consequences of his actions.
Let's dive into the mind of Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
And see if we can unlock the secrets of his success and his controversies.
All right. So we've examined Peter Thiel's ventures, his political maneuvering, even his more out there ideas like seasteading.
It's been quite a journey.
But to really crack the code of grifter or gifted,
Yeah.
we need to understand the ideas that shape his thinking.
Right. Dive into his worldview.
His worldview is fascinating.
That is.
It draws from philosophy, history, a healthy dose of contrarianism.
Definitely.
It's like he's assembled this unique intellectual toolkit
Yeah.
that guides his actions.
For sure.
So where do we even begin to unpack this? What are some of the key thinkers or ideas that have influenced him?
Well, his background in philosophy is key.
Yeah.
He studied at Stanford.
Right.
And he often mentions thinkers like René Girard, Leo Strauss, even Carl Schmitt.
Okay, for those of us who haven't spent hours in philosophy seminars,
Right.
could you give us a crash course on these figures and how their ideas might connect to Thiel's actions?
Sure. So René Girard,
Okay.
as we mentioned earlier, he focused on mimetic desire, this idea that we want what others want,
Okay.
leading to conflict and rivalry.
Right.
And Thiel seems to apply this zero-sum thinking to many areas,
Like what?
believing that for someone to win, someone else must lose.
So this connects back to his support for ventures like Palantir.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, which thrives in a world of perceived threats and competition.
Right.
And maybe even his willingness to go after Gawker,
Oh, yeah.
seeing it as like a personal battle he needed to win.
Exactly. Those are great connections.
They are.
Yeah. Now, Leo Strauss,
Okay.
he was a political philosopher who argued that great thinkers often conceal their true beliefs
Oh, really?
to avoid persecution. And Thiel seems to have adopted this approach,
Interesting.
often expressing his ideas in these cryptic and provocative ways.
So it's like we need to read between the lines,
Yeah.
looking for hidden meanings and agendas.
Exactly.
That makes things even more complicated.
It does. And then there's Carl Schmitt,
Okay, Carl Schmitt.
a German jurist known for his theories on political power.
Oh, wow.
He believed the core of politics is this distinction between friend and enemy.
So an us versus them mentality.
Yes, in a way,
Sure.
Schmitt argued that strong leaders need to clearly identify enemies,
Cool.
both internal and external, to maintain order.
I see.
He was also skeptical of liberal democracies,
Really?
thinking they prioritize individual rights over the collective good.
Wow, that's a pretty intense view.
It is.
And not exactly what you'd expect from a Silicon Valley entrepreneur.
Right.
Does Thiel really subscribe to these ideas?
Well, he's certainly drawn to Schmidt's emphasis on decisiveness and strong leadership,
Okay.
which might explain his support for figures like Donald Trump.
Right.
But Thiel's interpretation of Schmitt is controversial.
Oh, is it?
And some scholars argue he's twisting the ideas to fit his own agenda.
So once again, we're left with more questions than answers. Is he a true believer in these philosophies?
I don't know.
Or just picking and choosing the parts that justify his actions?
Who knows?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape.
Precisely.
And that's what makes Thiel so fascinating.
Yeah, he's a puzzle.
He pulls from sources that many would consider incompatible.
Oh.
Blending libertarianism with authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Individualism with a belief in, like, powerful leaders.
It's strange.
It's a unique and often perplexing blend.
It is.
So, after all this, after examining his actions, his words, his influences,
Yeah.
what's your verdict? Grifter or gifted?
Honestly, I don't think it's that simple.
Oh, really?
He's undeniably brilliant.
Okay.
A master strategist who can spot emerging trends and make bold bets. He's not afraid to challenge conventions and take risks,
Right.
even if it means courting controversy.
So that's a point in the gifted column.
Maybe.
But he's also someone who seems driven by this deep-seated belief in his own vision for the future.
Right.
Even if that vision clashes with societal norms
Yeah.
or raises ethical concerns.
He does what he wants.
He operates by his own rules.
He does.
And that's both intriguing and unsettling.
It is.
And his motivations remain somewhat opaque.
They do.
Is he a true idealist?
I don't know.
A ruthless opportunist? Or, as seems most likely, a complex mix of both?
Probably.
I think that's for each individual to decide.
Yeah, good point.
There's no easy answer.
Nope.
No single label that captures the full complexity of Peter Thiel.
He's one of a kind.
But that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
I agree.
It's forced us to grapple with those difficult questions.
It has.
To examine the blurred lines between innovation and exploitation.
Yeah.
Between ambition and ethics.
It's been eye-opening.
And ultimately, that's the takeaway for our listeners.
What's that?
In a world where charisma and controversy often collide,
Right.
it's more important than ever to develop our own critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
To question motivations, to look beyond the surface,
Right.
and examine the potential consequences of actions. Especially when those actions have the power to reshape our world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well said. Peter Thiel's story is a cautionary tale.
It is.
A reminder that success doesn't always equate to virtue. And that disruption can come at a cost.
For sure.
It's a reminder to stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop questioning.
Question everything.
Now, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder these questions.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep diving deep
Keep diving.
and keep questioning everything.
See you next time.